And we're
Good.
yes.
Good evening.
How are you, Mr. Pritchard? I see you've got a new setup for the new year. It looks very elegant.
Yeah, I'm trying out a different thing. Let me know if I get too quiet.
Yeah, well,
or maybe that's a blessing. I don't know.
It's a booming voice, actually. It looks like you're coming from Buckingham Palace. Did you escape Bogotá? Or you?
I've actually got a little silver teapot just up there. No, it's been a good Christmas, New Year break. Plenty of opportunity to change things around, try a different layout in the house. I'm very happy.
And did you? Well, okay. So you got up to that over the Christmas. Anything else? Did you get away from Bogotá at all?
No, I've decided to stay in and be a bit of a house cat. I didn't really feel like going away. I don't think it's necessarily the right decision to make at the moment, unlike some other people, but I'm sure we'll talk about that later. What about yourself, Brendan? What have you been up to?
Well, about the most exciting thing I did over the Christmas period was shave. It's slowly coming back, but I did this for the new year. And outside of that, no, very tame, stayed within the city environs because we are responsible citizens, Ollie. We don't gallivant off to other countries, potentially bringing back God knows what. But
I don't know who you're referring to, Brendan. I don't know what that could possibly be.
It might become clearer a little bit later on. But yes, Ollie, this is our first Bogotá Nights of 2021. And while the Christmas season just gone was nothing like its normal merriness, there's still a chance you may have missed a few interesting stories over the last 2 weeks or so. Don't worry, we're here to fill you in on what you need to know, or at least what you should know. For starters, as we've been alluding to, our beloved Mayor López eloped for a holiday, that is, leaving a locked down city in the hands of a paisa for a few days. More on that to come, and do send us your thoughts on that. Are you now separating your household waste into 3 different coloured bags depending on what the material is? No, you're not? Well, from the 1st of January throughout Colombia, you're meant to be doing just that. And what about Colombia's looming hippo-inflation? Yes, you heard me correctly, hippo. There's more to the Pablo Escobar legacy than cocaine and violence. And in football, did the domestic league final pass you by? If you're a Santa Fe fan, you probably wish it did. We'll be talking about all that and much more over the course of the next 55 minutes or so. As ever, we do love to hear your thoughts, so send us a message on any of the above we've just mentioned, or anything else that you feel we must be talking about as we head into 2021. Use the live comment facility right now, or if you're watching this recorded, you can send a message via the medium on which you're viewing us, or simply send a tweet to everybody's favorite English language newspaper in this country at Bogotá Post. Firstly, though, Ollie, a new year, but unfortunately it's same old in many ways. Coronavirus clearly hasn't read the script that we're meant to be getting over the chaos this virus has caused. As mentioned, all of Bogotá is now going into some type of lockdown, while many other parts of the country have similar, if not more severe, measures in place. It seems things are getting worse, not better. A cynic might say that we're trying the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But I know you're not a cynic, Ollie, so what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I don't really want to dig too much onto whether it's the right decision right now. I mean, we'll find that out long term. I think basically this was always on the cards, wasn't it? That people would spend Christmas and novenas and New Year's going around talking to one another and mixing between families, traveling around, all that kind of thing. And of course, you know, the chicken's coming home to roost very much on this. It's interesting what you say that we're all going into a lockdown. I mean, that's right. The next 4 days after midnight tonight, that's going to be total restriction on mobility, they say. What that actually means, it's quite hard to work out. You know, if for no other reason than we don't really know how this is going to be enforced. I mean, that's always the key thing. You know, we know what's written down on paper, but what ends up getting actually enforced may be a completely separate thing. So there's that to think about. But also, I mean, it looks like we're very much back to the days of April, the original simulacro, if you remember that. That was, certainly very, very heavy compared to later lockdowns. And the fact that the Alcaldía went out of their way to say that there would specifically be no more lockdowns by locality, that's kind of a cast iron guarantee that there will be. And already we've seen it get extended across to Teusaquillo, Kennedy, and I can't remember where the other one is. Hopefully somebody listening will remember that for me. Fontibon, yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm assuming, for example, living here in Chapinero, I'm assuming we'll be in lockdown before the end of January again.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an explosion there in Teusaquillo as well, so you would expect it. Of course, there's one little difference, Ollie, that you mentioned to me earlier about this. This isn't coming from the mayor's office. This is coming from the Ministry of Health. So it's nationwide conditions that basically, if you're ICU, intensive care units, or UCI, as they would say in Spanish, are above a certain percentage, these are the measures you must follow. And it's a nationwide decree, I guess, that you have to bring these in. So while people might want to blame Claudia López, and we'll get on to Claudia in a bit, her hands are tied pretty much on this one, it would seem.
Absolutely. 85% is the magic number there, Brendan. So the minute you go up to 85, and you can keep an eye on that fairly easily. Most Colombian government sources are pretty open. I think Colombia is extremely good at that. It's generally fairly easy to track UCI occupancy in most places. Obviously, there are going to be some strange outliers. I mean, a city like Leticia, for example, where UCI, UCI occupancy in Leticia is basically 100% or zero. There's not really much in between. But in the larger cities like your Bogotas, your Medellins, your Bucaramangas, Cartagena, Barranquilla, Cali, etc. Yeah, 85 is the magic number. That triggers some kind of immediate reaction. What that'll be, we don't know. This first part is coming in 2 stages, which I think is really interesting. We've got 4 days of total restriction of movement, followed by 4 days of night curfews. So things are going to go back to normal-ish on Tuesday after the Three Kings holiday. And yeah, we'll see what happens next.
So in theory, as you said, the devil will be in the detail, or the devil will be in the enforcement. But in theory, you could be asked by whoever is enforcing this to go home if you're out for a wander on the street with no good reason. But if you're deciding to drive to Huasca and you have proof that you're going there, that's fine. Seems a little bit silly, or it doesn't add up, does it?
There's a lot to pick over in these rules every time they come out. I mean, that was fine, I think, in March and April, that obviously decisions were being made on the hoof. Now, little less in the way of excuses, I think. They've had a long time to think about the next step. There's been plenty of time to put things into control, but as a citizen of the UK, seeing how cack-handed the response there has been in a country, I think many people would say better known for organisational ability than Colombia. I think it's fair to say, many nations are struggling with this. It's not unique to Colombia. However, this idea about moving between departments, between cities, it feels to me insane, Brendan. And again, like a lot of these measures have always felt, it feels very much like these measures are things that disproportionately affect or don't affect people in different social strata. The people returning tend to be from higher social strata, those who have the money and the leisure time to just jet off out of the city or fly or do whatever they happen to be doing. And again, it's everybody that suffers for the excesses
Yeah.
of a few. Now, that's not everybody. I mean, I'm certainly not saying that. I'm certainly not saying that everybody who's going away is, some privileged princelet, but definitely there's a trend in that direction. And it's interesting how those liberties haven't been stopped, but all the rest have. And as you say, it just makes no sense. Why would you allow people to potentially be transporting the virus much bigger distances, then not allow us to move around? This time, thankfully, exercising outdoors is allowed. You've got an hour every day to do that. So there are some there are some more sort of freedoms that we didn't have last time. Parks are being closed, though, as before.
Yeah, but look, the other thing is it's been well documented, and studies back this up, that where you're most likely to pick up the virus is indoors in closed spaces. So why they restrict? Now, I understand they don't want loads of people out on the streets at the same time, but if you're going for a run and no one's around you, or even a walk,
you absolutely. But you can go for a run. That's fine.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying an hour. And again, how much is that going to be enforced is another thing. Like for me, as far as I'm concerned, and knowing what we know about how this virus is transmitted, you're better off sitting out in the sun for the whole day rather than maybe going back into your into your apartment, or if you're in a conjunto as well, where there are lots of people coming and going. You're probably safer sitting outside in the park.
I don't think the authorities really care about people being outside per se. I think what they're really worried about is you being outside on your way to somewhere, another enclosed space. So it's not about you being outside. I think it's more about you going to a shopping mall, going to a cinema, going to a place where you would be indoors and you would be potentially contagious. I think that's the logic there. It is worth noting, Brendan, the Transmilenio, it was rumoured earlier that the Transmilenio was going to be closing at 8. That's now not taking place. So, or was never scheduled to take place. It's not really clear. But anyway, the initial panic is over. Transmilenio will operate as normal, which seems to be a bit of a victory for common sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, if they're going to keep essential services open, and most people working in those are people without great resources to be traveling around in cars or whatever private transport, then you would need public transport functioning. But then on the flip side, of course, there's been a lot of memes doing the rounds of what's not permitted, and then it's always juxtaposed with a shot of the Transmilenio packed and people in close quarters. So there's all these inconsistencies in it. It's difficult to know, but we are where we are, I guess. By the way, Angela was getting in touch saying Ingat Tiva is the other, but that Ingat Tiva is already in the strict lockdown.
With Suba and Usaken, yeah.
Yeah, well, officially I am here. I was going to say, and I know we're going to get into travel and all that kind of stuff in a second, and our beloved mayor, but I just get the feeling, and already, as I said, here in Usaken, my part of the city, we're already in the strict lockdown, but it kind of has an eerie feel to it that, well, maybe I've just forgotten what it was like back in March and April. Maybe it was like that as well, but I don't know, like I get the sense that it's different this time, different in a negative way, that it's going to be tougher. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong with that, but the next few days will tell a tale, I guess. But I don't know, do you get that feeling down your neck of the woods?
Similar. Who's to know if it's just coincidence, but I did notice a great deal more police people out and about when I went for my second walk with the dogs this afternoon. We had bicycle police, which we don't normally see down our way. A couple of people were being asked for their cedulars. And even just walking past the various groups of police, absolutely that thing that it didn't. There's quite often police around our zone because I live very close to a big police training centre as well as a police station. And, sometimes you walk past and they're very much drinking coffee, hanging out. They want to pet my dogs and make small talk. Sometimes you walk past and they're giving you the copper's stare. And absolutely, it felt like being at a football match. It's that little... we're waiting for something to happen thing. Now, whether that's just paranoia, coincidence, who knows? But I agree with you. And actually, the fact that this has been called by the national government, not by the alcaldía, that leads me to think the police might be a little bit more open to enforcing the rules.
Yeah, we should see. Do let us know, by the way, guys, what it's like in your part of Bogota, if you're not in Usaken or down Parkway Way, where we're around that way where Ollie is, and what it was like over the last couple of weeks during the Christmas period, and also your thoughts on Mayor López deciding to head off. We're going to talk about that in a couple of moments. But I just, Ollie, a lot of the comments on the expat groups on Facebook and that, you get them almost on an hourly basis. What's the story with the test coming into Colombia if I'm flying in, blah, blah. So what is the deal right now as it stands?
All right, Jerry Seinfeld. What's the deal with PCR tests? Yeah, well, we're going to have a story out tomorrow, luckily, on the Bogotá Post about this. You're right, it is coming up. And there's a lot of people who want to know about testing in Bogotá as well, actually. Just, people worried they might have caught the virus. What can they do? What are their options? So from what we know, the PCR test requirement comes in next week. I believe it's the 12th that it's officially being applied. Airlines, on the other hand, might not be so accepting. So what the Colombian government is saying and what the airlines are enforcing might well be two separate things. I would definitely recommend everybody to check with their carrier, definitely, because we don't have a list of each individual carrier. We certainly don't have access to them airport by airport. You may well find that the same airline is issuing different guidance in, let's say, LA and Frankfurt. So do be aware that it isn't necessarily entirely on the government. A lot of it will be on carriers refusing to fly you. And of course, it's a very real possibility that you could end up getting stuck because, of course, so many airports are sort of being closed intermittently around the world. Yeah. Now, PCR is going to be required 3 days, so 72 hours before departure. Obviously, has to be negative. It must be PCR, not antigen. That's worth remembering. There was speculation, we don't really know if that's true, that you'll be able to get it airside in Colombia and then go into isolation while you wait for the results. That's definitely a possibility. That's certainly possible to do now. The reports we've had of travellers so far is that they've come in, they've been asked to isolate for 14 days. But again, this isn't enforced in any sort of way, so who knows?
Yeah. How much does that test cost at the airport?
I would have to check my notes, which are somewhere else. Okay. I don't think it's super, define expensive. I find it very odd that, there are so many people out there that will happily drop, 500,000 pesos a night on a hotel and then moan about a $30 or $40 exam. I find that extremely odd, but there you go.
Yeah. Interesting, you talked about like the recommended period of isolation. A friend of mine flew in from California last week, and he told me he got a call, and his Spanish is not great. He said he got a call he just understood the word migración and he didn't understand anything else. So they were probably checking up on him. He lives close to El Country Club. But he was there like, I don't really understand. So I think the woman just gave up in the end. But I don't know, did he get any further calls? But so they might be making random calls. But what's a phone call if they're calling on your mobile phone? You could be anywhere. If they actually call around to the house that you're meant to be staying in, a physical call.
Unless they're bugging you with tracking equipment.
Well, yeah, who knows? Maybe they've gone that sophisticated here. Who knows? Indeed. We're being watched from all angles. The thought police will be on us next here, Ollie. They'll be knocking on our doors. Okay, let's get on to Claudia Lopez. You used to call her, which I used myself in a story this week, Claudia Lopez, and then I thought afterwards, well, maybe it would have been better Claudia Lopez. She took a rather strange decision to head off on holidays, not inside the borders of Colombia, but off to Costa Rica, when she obviously knew this city was going to be going into some sort of a lockdown, at least part of it. Not the best move in the world, Ollie, was it?
Staggeringly stupid. I mean, I can't. I mean, I think you said yourself earlier today, you can't you have to sack any advisors. Why didn't anybody tell her, don't do this, Claudia? And why to God? I mean, it's staggeringly stupid. And what's interesting about this, I always think, Brendan, is that actually I don't think it's, I don't think the decision in of itself for her to go on holiday is maybe the worst in the world. I think there's worse things she can do. Yeah, she's not going out killing children. But it's more, how it's perceived. Regardless of the rights and wrongs of what you're doing, you have to think about how other people are going to view it. And, yeah, I mean, it doesn't look good, does it? Politicians in Colombia are famously very well paid, especially relative to the average Colombian. It doesn't look good for her to be swanning off on a foreign holiday when many people are having to tighten their belt. It doesn't look good to be leaving the country, taking unnecessary travel when you're telling everyone else to take the to take the virus seriously, that it's a real thing and you have to be careful with moving around. It's very strange to say, here are all the limitations I want you to observe on Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, etc. But by the way, I'm just going to go and have a fancy foreign holiday. These are just, I mean, it's just not a good look. Nothing about it looks good. And of course, the biggest thing in it, why now? Why not go on holiday in October, November? Down the line, save it for a bit. Why would you go just on the cusp of the, she was saying herself 2 weeks after Christmas and New Year, we're going to see a big increase in cases. She said that herself and she still went on holiday. It's bizarre.
Oh, yeah. PR disaster, a known goal, as I said in the article that I wrote earlier this week. If she'd gone on holidays even inside Colombia and kind of said, well, I'm supporting the local economy, because I think Duque was away. He must have left the coast, but he continued his condescending, as far as I'm concerned, his condescending TV addresses every night. But it looked like he was somewhere in the coast, something different in the background anyway. But yeah, to go abroad at this time, it just... Yeah. It really is ridiculous. She's left the door open for so many attacks. And it's interesting now, I see she's in a little bit of a spat again with the health ministry, because her office is saying that the rise in cases is due to the new strain that was in the UK. And the health ministry is saying, I mean, it's a bit of a battle over what at the end of the day. Does it really matter what's making the cases rise at the end of the day? It's the same coronavirus, if it's a mutation or not. But so she's saying it's the new strain. The health ministry is saying, no, we have no evidence at all, and that's not helpful. But so they're in this tiny little battle. But it's just, they seem like they're in their little own world there. And this is the mayor who's meant to represent and stand up for the working classes.
Again, yeah, that's such a huge part of it. Again, like you said, if Duque swanned off to America, I don't think anybody would care. If Peñalosa was still in power and he went off to his ancestral home in Washington, I don't think anyone would care, because, of course, that's in the same way no one cares if Peñalosa or Duque go to Euro Disney. That's not a big deal. If Petro does it, it's a different story because of what they stand for, because of the ideals. And you can say that's unfair with good reason, and that's fine. But the world isn't fair, as we all know, as our mothers are fond of telling us.
Yeah, well, as when Dookie goes to Disneyland, I think he's catching up with his long-lost relative, Porky Pig. Anyway, Let's move on to something slightly more positive. And as I said, guys, do let us know your thoughts on all of this. Do you think Mayor Lopez, is it much ado about nothing that she was all right? I think the most ridiculous thing, my final word on this would be...
It is worth, sorry, just before you jump in, it is worth pointing out that she has come back.
What that was going to be my final word. Is that,
sorry, go on.
It just shows you that she realized, oops, I think I've made a mistake now. There's a bit of uproar back home because off she goes. She's meant to be gone until the 11th, which is Monday, I believe. And then, she only goes for what, 3 or 4 days in the end, because she realizes, I've made a bit of a mistake here. Like, I can't believe you can be so stupid. Like, I can't believe. Anyway, I was going to say we'll move on to something slightly more positive, in theory anyway. We got notice of a 5-stage attack, if I could call it, or a rollout, is a better word to use, for the vaccine. So we don't have a start date yet, but there are 5 stages, which is kind of similar to most other countries in terms of obviously going through the most vulnerable and workers who are health workers and things like that. So it's something positive, and if we can even halfway match your native country, the UK, who seem to be firing ahead with the vaccines at the moment compared to continental Europe anyway, maybe there's a little chink of light at the end of this. Because I was listening to Duque, I unfortunately did catch one of his TV addresses last week where he said, look, guys, we got to be thinking about Christmas next year living with COVID. So I was like, oh, God, no, please. But maybe if this vaccine rollout is a success, who knows? Maybe by July we might be kind of getting back to something resembling normality. Am I being too optimistic?
Hard to say, Brendan. I mean, you mentioned the UK. By the time I wake up tomorrow morning, my grandmother will have been vaccinated. So yeah, it's definitely moving at a fair old pace in the UK. However, as my mother pointed out, she's obviously a generation back from my grandmother, and there's about 14 million people in the way before her. So she's not expecting to get vaccinated until middle of the year, autumn. So obviously in Colombia, where it's not going to be so easy to get hold of the vaccine, where there isn't as much disposable income anyway to just to buy it up, it's going to be really interesting. I mean, I'm speculating that at the moment I'm in 30 to 39 category. I think by the time the vaccine comes, I'll be in 40 to 49, so I'll have jumped up a category. But yeah, I'm assuming it'll be at least 14 months before it's coming around to me. There's one huge caveat there, though. I think it will become available to commercially buy.
Yeah. You said there's maybe a slight moral issue there as well, because it's not like there are vaccines in abundance and they're growing on trees. These take time, money, and effort to produce. And then if anyone can go and buy them, and the most vulnerable who really need them, because, I'll put my hand up here. I mean, if somebody told me, sorry, Brendan, we don't have any vaccine for you, I'd be there, well, fair enough. I'm very much low risk, I think. I hope. So I wouldn't be too concerned. And actually, I'd be interested to know, people watching, are you keen to get a vaccine? Do you want to be first in line? Would you go and buy it if it was available? Of course, there might be other issues at play there. If you wanted to travel to another country, they might expect you to have the vaccine or whatever. So
I think that's going to start coming in, and there's going to be, those are going to be huge questions. I think much more for us, people with a foot in 2 different countries. I suspect it's going to be a real big decision because, like you say, it is a very real moral issue to buy a vaccine that maybe won't be freely available for all the people who might need it more than you within, let's say, 6 to 7 months. But yeah, absolutely, we're going to have to think about it because we might have the possibility of going back to the UK, to Ireland, to Australia, to I doubt America will ever bring it in. Although, who knows? I mean, there is this big thing that when Biden moves in, what if he suddenly starts taking things more seriously than Trump did? What if movement between here and the States starts to become affected?
Oh, I think it's a guarantee that he will take it more seriously because, number one, he would be pretty much in favor of more lockdowns. Now, that won't go down well with Middle America, and the people who stormed Capitol Hill yesterday certainly wouldn't like that. But I think the US could be in store for a few more lockdowns come late January and February once Biden takes control of the White House. Of course, he might have a lodger for a few weeks if he can't get rid of Donald Trump, but we won't get into that.
No. Trump's promised today. He went on. He posted a video on Twitter where he's promising a safe, sane, and orderly handover. Finally.
Okay. Well, you know that old saying, and it's true with all these coronavirus measures as well. Or that old joke. How can you tell when a politician is lying?
They open their mouth, yeah.
They open their mouth, yeah, exactly.
Well, actually, in the case of Colombia, very easy. Just look for what they say they're definitely not going to do in the future, and you can bet your bottom dollar that's exactly what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
No more ley seca. No pico y cédula. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, maybe can I get them to say something that might work in my favor? Okay, Brendan, you're not going to receive free money, and then maybe I will. There you go. I hope so. By the way,
to be fair, they did originally say, Brendan, you're not getting a visa, and then you did. So, so it swings around, doesn't it?
Yeah, it works many ways. Just the comments coming in, Angela. You're spot on. Obviously, our Mayor Lopez did give the national government plenty of ammunition, and of course, there's no love lost between Casa de Nariño and what do you call the mayor's office?
Leobano.
Okay. Thanks for that, Ollie. Yeah, so that spat will continue. But I wrote this in my blog this week, Bogotá's Fraude Lopez, as I called it. I don't think it'll have any, negative effect on her politically because number one, people will forget about it probably fairly quickly.
Yes.
And her own supporters will just easily brush it off. So if you're against Claudia as it is already, well, it's just another thing to beat her with. But her supporters will just go, will you get over it? Like what happened?
Well, I think where it is interesting, Brendan, is that people form those opinions, don't they? And there are some people that still are on the fence about Claudia Lopez, and those people, they're going to start now fossilizing towards, feeling that she's not competent or a liar.
Yeah, and of course, in a year before a presidential election, all these things will add up too, as people, as you say, form their ideas which side they're going to fall on. Those swing voters, if they are here, they talk about Colombia being a divided country. Not sure if it's as divided as the United States. And I see we've a message in from New York. This is a family friend, but thanks, Robert, for writing in and telling us. Well, he reckons things won't be back to normal until sometime next year, and maybe then, Robert, I'll give you a visit up in New York when they are back to normal, hopefully. Let's get on to an absolutely rubbish story, Ollie, to move on from coronavirus and everything. Yeah, and literally, this is a rubbish story. Nationally now, the new directive from the Environment Ministry is that you have to pack your rubbish in different color-coded bags to do with what type of rubbish it is. So white bag is for manufactured recyclables, I guess you'd call them. A green bag for organic waste, and then a black bag for things that can't be recycled. Great in theory, but Ollie, I know you think in practice it's going to be an absolute waste of time.
Yeah, look, it works in my country, it works in your country, it works all over Europe, it works in Japan, it works in Singapore, I'm sure it works in Australia, New Zealand, all over the place. That's definitely, I agree with you. In theory, it's fantastic. In execution, I mean, at the moment, actually, Brendan, I mean, not everyone's always aware of this, I think, but we are already meant to separate our waste in Bogotá, just that I've never seen anyone do it. I do see conjunto porteros will quite often sort of keep the cardboard separate and then give it to the recyclers, which is nice of them. And of course, it is worth remembering that recycling is a hell of a lot more efficient here in Colombia than it is in anywhere in Europe, or in the States, or even in countries like Japan. Now, that's largely because Colombia has this huge community of recicladores who, I mean, you couldn't have people working under those conditions, especially the people, actually at the rubbish sites. People just wouldn't and couldn't work under those conditions in Europe for fairly obvious reasons. But they are actually incredibly efficient at what they do because, of course, they need that money. But yeah, I mean, I find it extremely frustrating, Brendan, in that I like to recycle. But it's just so haphazard. I have to wait for the recycladores to be coming round and then bring down the cardboard I've been saving up. But I never really know when they're coming around. They come around at a random time. If I put the cardboard in with my other rubbish, then people will just pull the bags to pieces, and then there's crap all over the pavement. So I think it's really, really, really difficult. And what frustrates me about this is, yes, it's true that Colombia has difficulties that, say, the United Kingdom doesn't have. We don't have people in the UK that would pull the bin bags to pieces. Not really. But, I mean, just for gosh's sake, the minimum you could do is just pop a leaflet through people's doors saying, here's the rubbish collection. Here's the days and rough times, more or less, when it's between, 6 and 10 on Tuesday. At least then I know what I'm dealing with, And, there's other things. You could say things like, put out cardboard only on this day. But do you know what I mean? Just make everyone's life easier.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a man well behind recycling as well. In Ireland, it's certainly part of the culture. I remember when it kind of started going that way in the mid-90s or whatever, and now it's kind of, you take to a military approach to it. But yeah, here it's even if you try and do your little bit, you just look at everybody else and you're kind of going, well, this is a waste of time. It reminds me of that stand-up sketch from a comedian who I know you like, Sean Locke, but he was saying, like,
genius.
He was doing his bit for the environment in the UK, and then he went to the United States, and he just saw everybody with their monster trucks and everything. He was like, what's the point? What's the point in doing this? And it's kind of like that here with recycling. You feel you're doing your little bit, but then, like, does it even make any difference? Now, as I said, go on.
Yeah, I mean, well, Angela's comment here, and as she says, exactly, who's going to check whether you packed your rubbish correctly? And that really is the hub of it. I mean, that I think is where everything starts and finishes. There are two big problems in Bogotá with rubbish collection. One is there is far too much rubbish collection in residential areas. Rubbish collection needs to be done once every 2 weeks, no more. If you're generating more rubbish than that, that's your problem. You sort it out. It won't be popular. It wasn't popular in the UK. I doubt it was popular in Ireland, but people got used to it eventually. Number two, you need to be prosecuted. Fly tippers need to be prosecuted. People who put out the wrong rubbish in the wrong places. Angela says, who's going to do it? Well, in other places I've lived, the rubbish collectors indeed do exactly that. When I lived in Japan, people would have little stickers put on their rubbish bags saying, we didn't pick this up because you've got the wrong rubbish in. Put it out on another day. When I lived, my friends in the UK tell me whenever I go back to visit, they say, oh yeah, no, if you put the wrong thing, they won't take it. And there you go.
Yeah, but I mean, the only thing is here, people don't seem to care. Like, they don't care if there's rubbish on the street.
Well, people, I mean, when I grew up in England, it was a bloody tip. I mean, Nigel Farage says, weren't they those halcyon days of the 80s, before we joined the EU properly? Okay, look, I'll tell you, it was full of rubbish. There were crisp, when I was young, there was crisp packets absolutely everywhere, chocolate bar wrappers, paper. People just lobbed stuff on the floor. They didn't care. And, you know, we changed that, and it took time. It took a long time, and it wasn't popular, and people didn't like it. But eventually the message sank in, and, you know, and now it's much nicer.
Am I pessimistic? Like, I guaranteed I'll walk, you know, tomorrow from out and about, if I'm allowed to be out and about, and go to my panaderia tomorrow for a look. And near that open big sewer drain, whatever you want to call it, on the 183, it's nearly guaranteed there's one corner there, and it's just going to be covered in rubbish all over.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But you're saying that can never change? I mean, you only have to look at the pictures. Look, remember, we don't have to go back into ancient history. We just need to think about our own lives. You know, the world changes, Brendan. I mean, you know, certainly when we first started hearing about Colombia, you know, this was a country with 20,000 homicides a year, an open conflict. You know, Medellin, a failed city. I mean, you know, to compare that with the Colombia of today, you know, it's almost like two different places. Picking up a bit of rubbish is definitely achievable.
Yeah, and again, money talks in this instance. Like, you could even start with small things in the supermarkets. Like, technically, the bigger supermarkets, you have to pay for your plastic bags. But the lower classes, working classes, a lot of them still just go to their local tienda or their local fruit and veg store, and there you can get your plastic bags like normal. I mean, they'll put every individual item in a plastic bag.
So get this. I once had an argument down there on Calle 45. I'll never go into that tienda ever again. I had a big argument with the guy because I said, "Oh, not in a plastic bag, please." And he said, "Oh, no, you have to have it in a plastic bag." That was his actual words. He insisted on putting the stuff in a plastic bag. He didn't want other people to see me buying things without the plastic bag.
Yeah, it's madness.
Unbelievable.
I wrote a story a few years ago called The Disposable Republic of Colombia. I mean, they love their desechables, as they call them here. Like, I can't understand. You go into a panaderia, and the default option is that they give you your coffee, even though they have China.
Oh, yeah, in a polystyrene thing, yeah.
Yeah. Like, no, it should be the other way around. Like,
I've lost count, Brendan. I've lost count of the amount of times I've been in a tourist area of Colombia, and I've said to them, listen, if you're going to be targeting foreigners, which many of them are, and that's why I'm, you know, on this tourist thing, if you're going to be targeting foreigners, you can't, you know, you just can't be going around giving them polystyrene and plastic all over the place, you know, when there's no need for it. Because, you know, tourists are not going to put up with that for much longer. And it's interesting what you say. I mean, it's a phenomenon I've noticed generally in poorer countries. You know, it's much, I mean, it would be unusual, I think, to be in most of Europe now and ask for a plastic bag at a shop.
Yeah.
I mean, the UK is a little bit behind in that respect, but I always feel when I'm in mainland Europe that, yeah, absolutely, you're and I fully agree with that. Why don't you have a bag? I don't understand people that go to a shop, you know, and need a plastic bag. What's wrong with you? Didn't you know you were going shopping?
Yeah.
And if you're not, I mean, look, it's not the end of the world if you go, okay, I'll go hungry then, and I'll come back with a bag in a couple of days.
Yeah, funny you mentioned with the UK a little bit behind the rest of Europe. I was in the UK in England in 2015 when the plastic bag tax came in, and I was with my brother-in-law. And I remember he said, this has always stayed with me, he used to use the plastic bags that he got at the shop for his rubbish. So then he said, well, hold on now. So I have to pay for I'll have to go and buy now plastic bags to put my rubbish into. So maybe that mentality will come through here with the Colombians. They're going to go, no, hold on now. So I have to buy a green bag for this rubbish, a white bag for this rubbish, and a black bag for this rubbish. So
I think a key part of where it was successful in England was giving out the depending what area you're in, the fact that the council gave out brown boxes and green bins and black bins, I think that did make a huge difference. Robert Schleich here, your friend from New York, you say?
Cousin, actually, to be precise.
Cousin, there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, typical Irish name there, Schleich.
Oh yeah.
But he says here that they give out fines if you don't separate. I'd be really interested to know what part of Colombia that is, because I've.
Oh no, he's
Oh, that would be New York. But actually, I fully agree with that. Yeah, don't take it, or I mean, personally, I'm quite radical on this. I think everybody should be forced to keep their rubbish in their house, preferably in their bedroom, and then that would just stop you creating so much of it.
That reminds me, slightly different, but when I was younger, and if I didn't wash up my dishes after me, my sister used to put them on my bed. So
Very reasonable, very smart sister.
Indeed. Yeah, well, we'll watch this space, but there doesn't seem to be, from what I can gather. I know we're only 7 days into the new year, but I don't see much happening on this new color-coded. But as you said, in Bogotá, it's meant to have been in place for the last number of years anyway, and not much has happened. So we shall see. Ollie, we'll move on and keep your comments coming in, guys. But just quick little thing, because last year we talked about in a couple of episodes, I think, inflation and how in this country the rate of inflation is generally much higher than what you get in Europe. But a headline in El Tiempo yesterday. A record low, the lowest since 1955, a nationwide inflation of 1.61%. So, on the positive side, we should go on. What?
I mean, let's remember here that's the lowest since 1955. Yeah, but the other numbers have always been stupidly high, and of course, this has been an economically. I mean, many countries are recording slumps.
Yeah, but if you tie that in, what did the minimum wage went up maybe by a little bit higher? So the government will probably go, hey, look, guys, you're in a bonanza 2021. The minimum wage now with the transport subsidy is just over 1 million pesos. And for any people who aren't familiar with the peso, that's in dollar terms now about what, $300 maybe?
But be very careful of that. I see a lot of memes that reference that, and they say ridiculous things like, the minimum wage now is actually less now than it was in the past because the peso is weaker against the dollar. I mean, that's a really false economy. You've got to be a bit careful, I think, with that. Because it doesn't give you an idea of the purchasing power parity of the peso.
I'm only saying it just so people have an idea of people listening outside. But yeah, I know you can't. You have to deal with it. What you can buy with that in the country, and yeah, like 1 million pesos. To be honest, probably the last few months. Okay, I pay higher rent than your average working class Colombian. I'm guessing, who would be in a strata 1 or 2 certainly. Okay, I don't have children and things like that, but you can live off 1 million pesos, and many people live off it. Now, of course, we talked before, what kind of quality of life are you going to have with that? That's another thing.
Yeah, that's very different.
Yeah. By the way, if people are wondering, just on that El Tiempo story and the inflation, the highest, so that 1.61% was across the board to Colombia. The highest was in Cúcuta on the border with Venezuela at 2.89%. Just looking at my notes here. And if you're looking for the city with the best value, Ollie, head to Ibagué, 0.22% inflation. So there you go.
Oh, but inflation's a positive thing, remember, in Colombia. I mean, it's like Colombia wants inflation. Because inflation's linked to growth.
Well, yeah, fair enough. But I'm on about if you want value for money, perhaps. That's what I'm thinking.
Oh, I see what you mean. But I would say there is a massive caveat on that, which is that you would be in Ibagué.
I've only passed through it, never stayed in it. So I'll take your word for it, Ollie.
Tells its own story, doesn't it?
But going from inflation to hippo-inflation, Ollie, and this is a story that you guys at the Bogotá Post as well have been kind of covering on and off since the existence of the newspaper. There was an alarming story, if I can say that, in El Espectador over the Christmas period, written by a biologist with a PhD in ecology and environmental sustainability, talking about that if nothing is done to check the population of hippopotamuses, which of course were brought in to this area not too far away from Medellin by the late drug lord Pablo Escobar back in the 80s in his Hacienda Nápoles, wasn't it? That's where it was. So he brought in a few hippopotamuses. Obviously, when Escobar was killed and these hippopotamuses were left to roam free, they now number, it depends who you ask, but anywhere between 80 to 100. And this expert was saying that if nothing is done, they will reach 1,500, their population, by 2039. And according to this particular expert, it would be an absolute disaster for that area of the Magdelena River, a very important, obviously, waterway for this country in so many ways. What she was calling castration, that was the heading on the story, wouldn't be enough. Basically, it's we have to start killing them.
The problem with castration is you've then got to wait for a hippo to sort of live and die, and they live quite a long time. And, there's 4 tons of them, potentially, each one. So, them being alive just for another year means munching their way through an incredible amount of vegetation. And there's just nothing to stop them. I mean, one of the big things here is I think people get a bit confused. They think that hippos are heavily predated in Africa. And of course they're not. I mean, there's not very much that can take on a hippo, including humans. And I don't mean humans kind of walking around looking to punch a hippo. I'm sure plenty of Australian backpackers would give it a go. Give it a fair old go, mate. They're very fond of punching wildlife. But shooting a hippo is not an easy task. You're talking about 4-inch thick skin, very rubbery. It's a ton of skin. It's very hard to kill hippos. It's not easy at all. And
they'd make good journalists then with that thick skin.
Clever, or politicians even, especially with all the feeding they require. But I think what the key thing here is about the hippos is exactly as you say. This was a problem that shouldn't really ever have come up. When you have 5 hippos, fairly easy to stay on top of them. When you've got 1,500 hippos, pain in the ass. And unlike Africa, that area of the Magdalena doesn't have massive droughts, which is what really does for the poor little hippos and keeps their numbers in check. Because, there's long periods where they can't hang around in their watering holes, where they have to leave, where there's not as much food, etc. Here it's the complete opposite. Food everywhere, no danger, no dry patches, bomb. I mean, they're not going to walk up to La Guajira, but yeah, they'll just keep... And of course then, as you say, the more of them there are, the more they're going to start bumping into humans. You don't want to be bumping into a hippo. They're massive.
Yeah, well, I mean, the only memories I have of hippos is that board game that we used to have, Hungry Hippos or whatever. I think I might have seen one in a zoo, and that's about it in real life. But yeah, it's interesting because there are some people, Ollie, though, that say that they're positive for the area because they drain out the rivers and things like that.
Oh yeah, look, I mean they do some positive things. Yeah, I mean they'll move around plant seeds and stuff like that, but their overall negative impact is pretty woeful. I mean, put it this way: there's no, and I do find arguments like this are a bit weird. People are often very fond of saying, "Oh, we can't damage the ecosystem," as if we haven't already irretrievably damaged it. I mean, built roads through massive parts of it, changed the carbon composition of the atmosphere, etc., etc. I mean, it's a kind of bizarre idea to imagine that you can protect an ecosystem even now. But even applying all of that, I mean, yes, they're going to destroy native species by out-competing them. They're going to munch their way through foliage, which is going to cause trouble. There's all kinds of knock-on effects with stuff like this.
Yeah, so I wonder could you kind of taser them or whatever, knock them out, and
taser them?
Well, no, what you call it, to knock them out, to give them that injection that.
Well, no, but again, that's the thing. I mean, that's fairly easy to do with a cow, even. A hippo's 8 times the size of a cow, which is already a pretty big animal. Cows are very docile as well. You walk up to a cow, it might get a bit angry and run at you. I mean,
Ollie, you need to visit my farm in Roscommon in the west of Ireland, and you'll see docile cows. Yeah, they'll run through you, half of them. But anyway,
yeah, but they don't have 4 foot long sort of tusks, do they? So yeah, no, it's.
Some of them nearly do, to be honest. Anyway, no, we'll leave that where it is. We'll finish up with a quick bit of sport, I guess, Ollie, because we're coming up to the hour mark. You are kind of a Santa Fe fan, are you? Or not really?
Very half-heartedly. Very half-heartedly.
Okay. Did you watch the final? Because I think it passed a lot of people by, did it?
I think it did. I really think it did. I've got a few Calenia friends who found it funny. I mean, I'm kind of happy. I mean, it's nice to see America back and sort of winning things.
Yeah, of course, they had a lot of issues to do with the old drugs trade and things like that. So they had a few years in the wilderness, but back, and that was their 15th title. So they're up there now with Millonarios and things. So they're certainly back at the top of the tree. Another quick one that El Espectador mentioned before we wrap up here. Radamel Falcao could be leaving Turkey and heading stateside to the Major League Soccer, guys. Would that be a good move? It'd be closer to home anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic move for him. I think Falcao's a great ambassador, really, and role model for Colombian football. He's acquitted himself very well. He seems to be a very likable person. Conducts himself very well, and I think he'll be a boon to Major League Soccer, and I think it'll be another feather in his cap. I especially like the way what I'm very impressed with about Falcao is that he seems to be very adaptable. He's not one of these players that moans about the weather being cold or anything like that. He just seems to get on with it.
Who are you alluding to there? I'm glad you brought up the weather, because this is almost like a proper news program now. I want to finish on the weather, and we can't even agree on the weather. I think it's been unseasonably wet the last few days, but you're thinking, no, it's still dry. But
I think it was a very dry, rainy season. I mean, it was really only November.
Yeah, but it's not meant to rain at the end of December and early January. And yesterday,
people have bizarre memories. It's not like it never rains in those months. I absolutely guarantee we've a few weeks coming up where it'll just be absolutely glorious and scorching.
Which, of course, is wonderful for us, but it's not great for agriculture and the farmers and other people who rely on rain. So, yeah, that could be another issue we're dealing with, drought. Ollie, I know next week is going to be potluck. We're going to put in a few topics into a bag and pull one out. So, guys...
and yeah, if anyone's got any suggestions, is there anything you'd like to see us cover?
Exactly. Let us know. Write a message. That is it. Our time is up, guys. Until next Thursday, enjoy lockdown.